We have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how do you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. You think I would check to see which episode we're on, but I have no clue, so we'll call it episode 69. And joining us today, we have from the Fantasy Pros, Mike Tagliere. How you doing, Mike?
I am doing good. What I'm missing, though, is that fantastic stash from your intro. You had this giant handlebar mustache, and now it's a full-grown beard. What happened?
So, funny story.
Thank you.
Funny sneeze. So, as a bald guy in the community, and Major can attest this, once you start going bald, you just find different ways to grow it elsewhere. And I've come to grips with my baldness, so the beard's starting to kind of take over. But I actually put this out to Twitter and put a Twitter vote out there. Should I keep with the beard or should I go with the stash again? I personally want to go with the stash. Twitter wants the beard. The wife wants the clean shaven. So me and the wife are out of luck. Twitter prevails on this one.
Twitter's wrong.
Twitter's wrong.
You want to talk impressive. Like, don't worry, I haven't trimmed the stash either since. So we've got kind of a little bit of range here. We can still get up to eyeball length with the mustache.
Yeah, like a Raleigh Fingers thing going on there.
We could.
Yeah.
Well, my old man here, we all have role models in life, and a lot of us have our father figure there. So my father has got the old Lanny McDonald stash going on. He's got the big honking mustache. He's kind of got it curled up a little bit now.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I don't think he's seen his top lip in probably 60 years now. So that's kind of the goal that I'm going with right now. I don't have much of a top lip to begin with, so the mustache kind of takes care of that.
Yeah, it's called upside down head. That's what we're doing. We're pulling off the upside down head.
Nice.
Exactly. And if you grow the beard big enough, then you don't have to worry about the neck, trimming the neck hair, or anything. The beard just kind of encompasses. And really, it just saves you on grooming altogether. It's fantastic.
For sure.
Cal,
Yeah,
you should
I can see
join
that.
us. Cal,
No.
join us.
No. Clean shave. Keep it that way.
So we got to talk a little bit of football. We're kind of contractually obligated to do so. I know it's kind of the down part of the show, so here we go. We're going to kick into this. Recently, you released an article here that kind of talked about the best dynasty values for each team. Well, we're not going to go into each team because that would take up the entire show, but we all are homers. We all have our own homerism that involves with this. So, Calvin, what team would you want Mike to talk about first?
Well, let's talk about the team that isn't quite sure, at least I'm pretty sure. Twitter isn't quite sure what that they're going to do at quarterback. How about the New Orleans Saints?
Saints are in a weird spot, and it's really difficult to buy any of them right now just because you don't know. All we've seen with Sean Payton, we've seen him coach Drew Brees. That's what we've seen. We've seen glimpses of Teddy Bridgewater, who played really well, probably some of his best football under Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw somehow on the fly transition to Taysom Hill, and everything kind of worked out. It was really weird how that happened. So I do have faith in Sean Payton, but at the same time, the prices haven't come down in a way that I'd want them to in order to invest in them in Dynasty. One of the players that I do believe comes as a value right now is Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, I was going through this the other day with on our podcast. There's 7 quarterbacks all time who have thrown for 5,000 plus yards, and the names in there are legit Hall of Famers. And Jameis Winston's one of them. I mean, he's obviously not a Hall of Famer, but he has done some things. And even though he had Mike Evans, he had Chris Godwin, he had Bruce Arians willing to throw the ball down the field, it takes a certain type of talent to get there. It's almost like you can't throw Aaron Rodgers in with any head coach, Mike McCarthy, and get Super Bowl wins, you know? So that just doesn't happen. It takes talent to actually get to those numbers. So kudos to him for that. QB 28 in startup drafts right now, which is basically not even QB2 territory. If he gets that starting job, and he took less money to stay in New Orleans, if he does get that starting job, which we're starting to hear beat reporters speculate that he will win that job, he's going to look as a tremendous value right now. And honestly, if he plays well, he could a 3-4 year deal with the Saints, and all of a sudden you're going to see him drafted as a top 18 fantasy quarterback next year.
I know me. I love the deep sleepers. I love the small school guys. I love Kawan Baker in the Saints. I think he's going to somehow creep himself into that lineup. But do we see a value in either Traquan Smith or Marquez Callaway?
Traquan would be the one because he's the clear-cut number 2 on this team. I'm surprised they really didn't add a wide receiver to at least try and replace Emmanuel Sanders and what he brought to the team, especially if Jameis comes into the picture, because Jameis is a guy that's willing to take the shots down the field, right? And that's where Traquan has really shined with the Saints. When he gets targets, I've done this in the primer. I highlighted once Emmanuel Sanders got hurt or Michael Thomas was out of the lineup, I was like, if Traquan Smith is getting 5+ targets, he's actually performed really well. So if they do go with Jameis, I'm going to get some shares of Traquan Smith. If they go with Taysom Hill, not so much, because I think it's not going to be as pass heavy as an offense. In this defense, by the way, is going to take some steps backwards. They did lose one of their starting cornerbacks, Janoris Jenkins, this offseason. They lost the interior of their defensive line, Sheldon Rankins. They lost one of their best pass rushers. They might lose Marshawn Lattimore for a little bit of time. He's dealing with a felony off the field. So there's a lot of question marks between the team that they're fielding, the salary cap issues that they had, and the quarterback. So the Saints are just throw everything up in the air right now and kind of wait for everything to fall.
Speaking of everything falling, Major, you got to San Francisco.
Yeah. Are we done with the Jimmy G saga, or is it just beginning?
I think we're done. I mean, I do believe that they're going to start the season with Garoppolo under center. Trey Lance is a guy that going through his college career, 288 pass attempts. Yeah. I mean, it's very reminiscent of a Mitch Trubisky type quarterback. And I'm not saying he's Trubisky. I'm not saying that at all, because what he put on film during the 2019 season, lights out. Like, if he did that again in 2020, he might be in the conversation for number 1 pick overall with Trevor Lawrence. But we didn't get that. What we saw is a small little glimpse of, like, they set that game in 2020, that one game. It was meant to showcase his talents, and he really didn't do it. It was actually, that was the first game I watched from Trey Lance, and I was like, I messaged Yace on our podcast because he's a huge Trey Lance guy. I was like, yo, what are you telling me to watch? Like, this is not good. And then I went back to 2019, obviously a completely different player that year. So there are some uncertainties about him. I think they have to ease him in. I think it's better for rookie quarterbacks to get some time behind the starter. Patrick Mahomes behind Alex Smith. You go back to Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre. Some of these quarterbacks sat and they didn't take as long to develop, because it's just like, sit back, take in the playbook. I do wonder when that transition is going to happen, though. It's going to happen at some point, but it's going to be a completely different offense when they go to Trey Lance versus what it is with Jimmy Garoppolo. So the 49ers, fun team. I'm actually working on a head coach ranking article right now, and I know people are going to be pissed off at me that Kyle Shanahan's not higher, but I mean, he's 3 of 4 seasons have been losing seasons, and I know he dealt with a lot of quarterback. He dealt with so many injuries last year. You could name every position. There were injuries everywhere. But at the same time, it's like, now you lose Robert Salah, and it's like, okay, now that's another question mark. The defensive talent you had on that side of the ball, the secondary in particular, you started losing some talent there. So there's some question marks there. But overall, the 49ers, if Trey Lance pans out, I mean, the ceiling is Josh Allen type production there. And I think that's what they traded up for. So Jimmy Garoppolo will be gone before long. It might be the Patriots. I don't know. But I wouldn't anticipate him starting more than 4 games.
Oh, is there any? Oh, go ahead, Tara.
I was just going to ask, how do you see the running back situation shaking out? I know there's a lot of uncertainty with who's the one to own for the future.
No, and that's the thing is this is a backfield that it's almost like we don't even need them to have a workhorse running back. We don't need a Steelers situation with Najee Harris. All we need is a 2 running back situation. If we have a 2 running back situation, this team uses their running backs 450 carries a season. So if we were to somehow eliminate Jeff Wilson from the equation, all of a sudden Raheem Mostert would look really good. And obviously Trey Sermon, them trading up in the 3rd round, it was similar to what the Bears did for like a David Montgomery. They believed in him. And was Trey Sermon someone that popped off in film and said, oh, this guy is a game changer? No, but I think Kyle Shanahan realized that he fits into his system. But does he utilize him right away? Raheem Mostert's a good running back, but he's aging. I think he's 29 now, maybe even 30, but very few miles on his system, on his tires. So I still think this is a timeshare, and I think it's going to be somewhat of a mess because Jeff Wilson has been really good in goal line situations. He's another guy, very low miles on his tires, even though he's getting up there in age, but they've all produced. And that's the common theme here, right? Is that they all produce except for Tevin Coleman when they get a chance to in this offense. So Raheem Mostert, Trey Sermon, I anticipate those guys kind of alternating, flip-flopping, because if you go back to the 49ers last year, I think of the top 10 or top 9 running back performances for the 49ers last year, there were like 5 different running backs in there, including
Right.
Kyle Juszczyk,
Mhm.
fullback. But it's just JaMychal Hasty. He even had a day. So I don't think he wants a one-back approach. So if people start drafting Trey Sermon, which I've seen happen in like that RB 25 to 30 range, I think they're kind of, I don't want to say wasting a pick, but they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I think Wayne Gallman and Hasty, I don't think they make the big roster when it's all said and done.
Right.
I think the real dynasty value could be Mostert or Jeffrey, but not with San Francisco. I think Wilson may find that value once he leaves San Francisco because San Francisco loves that 2-back set. Mostert this year with Wilson, and they also drafted 2 running backs who've never been the lead back, who've both performed well given that timeshare in both Trey Sermon at Oklahoma and at Ohio State with Master Teague, and Elijah Mitchell, Trey Regis at Louisiana there. They both performed extremely well, and they almost kind of give their old Trey Sermon as Mostert. Wilson kind of gets played by Elijah Mitchell. So San Francisco basically drafted what they already had to replace what they got going forward. I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic moving forward. Tara, who else do you got?
Well, I've got Green Bay. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and the obvious one is Devontae Adams. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people is a lot of concern about Aaron Jones. And even though he's got that contract, the worry with how he pans out if, in fact, Aaron Rodgers leaves.
I'm a little worried. I think that people have underestimated Aaron Jones's talent for a long time. And it's finally gotten to the point where I think people realize he's really freaking good. He's Alvin Kamara light to me. Like those two are so similar in a lot of ways. They're not big running backs. They play bigger than they are. They're extremely shifty. They contact balance up the yin yang. He's such a good running back. But the problem is, if Aaron Rodgers isn't there, all of a sudden this offense is not going to be projected to score that many points. They're not going to put points on the board like they always do. They're probably going to transition to more of a run-heavy approach, and that's going to involve a lot more A.J. Dillon, which fortunately Jamal Williams is gone. Jamal Williams has been eating into that. But that it all comes back to the idea that Aaron Jones is a guy that didn't need a whole lot of touches like Alvin Kamara to give you elite production. But again, if those scoring opportunities start to dissipate and you start to worry about that, that's where it creeps into my mind. So Aaron Jones, very talented back. They're obviously going to give him touches signing to the big contract that they did. So I'm not going to move him out of my top 12 if Rodgers goes, but he'd be at the very bottom end of the RB1 conversation. And there's some additional risk involved in picking him there because you almost get into the territory of guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? Where you have one guy that you know is tied to an elite offense, a guy that they're going to score points. The question is, does he get them? They didn't really replace Le'Veon Bell. So before Le'Veon Bell joined the Chiefs, we saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the number 11 running back in half PPR formats through 6 weeks. So if we get that back, that's the more of the conversation that I think we'd be having with Aaron Jones, because again, does Jordan Love or the quarterback that they put under center, Blake Bortles, I don't know, do they check down a lot? You know, Rodgers is not necessarily a check down quarterback, but he's highly efficient when he's targeting his running backs, and those targets are worth more than they would be to the average running back. So I love Aaron Jones, and I don't want to bet against his talent, but losing Rodgers would downgrade everyone in that offense. It's just the question of how far do we downgrade him? How much risk do we want to take on in our rosters? Because all of a sudden, the sure thing that you have with him is just it's gone, and there's risk involved with those picks.
Yeah, and like you said, the big thing about him is that he's always been undervalued for his actual production.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I do an article every year, and basically I look at the touches. So every touch that a running back gets on the field, every target they get on the field has an expected value. And I'm not talking about in general. I'm talking about a specific yard line. So a carry on the 45-yard line is worth more or is worth less than a carry that's in the 15-yard line. A target, same thing. So I go through and I track every running back's touches, wide receivers too, and Aaron Jones is the only running back that's popped top 6 every single year I've tracked it. He's always scoring more than he's expected to. He's just so damn good. And again, people could say it's the offense, but Jamal Williams is not in that category. So it's just the dude is special, and I think people need to realize it.
And then finally, the Las Vegas Raiders. Is there any dynasty value to be had there at all? Like, did you find anything that you could actually write about, or did you have to kind of make stuff up as you went when talking about the Raiders?
That was one of the teams where it was really tough to find value, to be honest with you. I'm not a big Henry Ruggs guy. I hated the pick when they made it. But I was hoping, you know, when last year before the season, they talked about using Henry Ruggs in the slot. And I was like, yes, they realize he's not just a field stretcher. He's the guy that you want near the line of scrimmage. You want to use him on screens. You want to use him on some handoffs. You want to get the ball in his hands, slants, do whatever you have to do. But instead, what do we have? We have that him treated like a guy that you're targeting, average depth of target 20 yards down the field. And it's like 3 targets a game. This is real. You passed on Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb for this. Like, that's what you did. So for me, it's not so much to say that he's a terrible football player, but I think they miscast him in terms of what they wanted him to be, what his strengths are. And I don't have faith in this coaching staff. John Gruden and Greg Olson have ruined fantasy upside outside of Darren Waller, but Waller, he's whatever. But the targets are there. Henry Ruggs, he's the one that I would say, just because the hope is that, hey, they brought in John Brown. They have Brian Edwards. Do they play those guys in the perimeter and do they move them to the slot? But that means that Hunter Renfrow would go to the bench, and they seemingly love Hunter Renfrow. So I don't trust the coaching staff enough to buy any of these players. But if you were going to, Ruggs is going around the wide receiver 50 range right now, which, okay, you take him as a bench receiver and you're able to wait a year or two to see what happens. But as long as John Gruden and Greg Olson are there, I don't really want to be associated with that offense if I don't have to.
And then finally, speaking of offenses, we're going to move along in this football talk. So we're getting a little long-winded when we talk about football for our show. Big debate on Twitter right now. Who is, in your opinion, the greatest deep threat of all time?
This is a loaded question, and that's why I didn't even respond to it on Twitter, because I know it's a big thing. It depends on the quarterback. That's the answer, because if you have someone like Aaron Rodgers with precision accuracy, okay, he doesn't need someone like Randy Moss to reach over players. He drops the ball in the breadbasket, and then it's like all of a sudden it's like, is Deshaun Jackson that guy? And then you talk like Randy Moss, he was like the combination of everything, because if you drop it in his breadbasket, he's going to catch it. If you underthrow him by a couple yards, he's going to go up and get it. But then again, you think about Randy Moss. I said, when I play when I want to. Like, that's a real thing that you have to bake into how you feel about Randy Moss. Now, Moss has grown as a person over the years. I love Randy Moss now. I absolutely love the dude. I think he had some growing up to do in his earlier days. But Tyreek Hill is a guy that, the reason that he looks so damn good is because Andy Reid is a phenomenal play caller. Like, if you were to put Randy Moss in the slot and do what they're doing with Tyreek Hill, I mean, you can't defend it. And the reason I tell people that is because when you put a receiver in the slot, it's the whole field. So Deshaun Jackson played in the slot early in his career, couldn't do it anymore because he took some big hits, and he was strictly a perimeter receiver. So what he did was special, because teams can tilt coverage all they want, and he'd basically beat that deep safety. They tilt coverage his way, he's still going to beat it. But Tyreek Hill, they move him all around. He plays in the slot on 45 to 50% of his snaps. So therefore, the safety has no idea. And if you want to assign 2 guys to him, then you're screwed with Travis Kelce, and you're going to leave him with a linebacker or whatever it is. And you just can't do it. So Andy Reid is manipulating that. He's moving Tyreek Hill around. He's preventing teams from game planning against him. And that's why he's so damn good. But in the end, it depends. It depends on what you want. I mean, Calvin Johnson was the best to go up and get it. But if I had to pick one, if it's like in a vacuum, it's Randy Moss.
Yeah, I like that, because lots of people talk Randy Moss. A lot of the older football guys, a lot of the newer people are talking Tyreek Hill. You want to talk speed? Deshaun Jackson's done some fantastic things on catches over 50 and 60 yards. I think he's tied or just trailing Jerry Rice in those categories himself, because Jerry Rice, I think, leads all pass catchers with touchdown receptions over 50 and over 60. I think Deshaun Jackson's right there. But someone that needs a little bit more love, and I tweeted this earlier today just because I know he won't get any recognition, was the great Lance Allworth. Because if you look at his numbers between 62 and 72 in an era where Mel Brunt could grab you by your face mask and throw you to the ground and step on you, that'd still be a perfectly legal jam. Between 62 and 72, he had 27 touchdowns of over 50 yards or more. He had 19 touchdowns of over 60 yards or more. He's a guy, and that's what Dan Feltz, that air raid system, Corrali there, he's letting it rip. That was kind of in that era where, the pass finally started really taking off as far as what we consider in today's day and age. But like you said, it's so dependent on how you want to view it. Yeah. Do you want to take Jerry Rice and give him a Patrick Mahomes type arm? Like, he had Joe Montana for the most of those, but you put a lot of these guys in a situation. Randy Moss, you give him Patrick Mahomes where he's just going to let it rip down the field, rather than, well, I guess Dante Culpepper's not a good example, because he can let it rip, he can let it fly, not with quite the accuracy that Mahomes does. But you take any of these quarterbacks and you kind of interchange these receivers, and maybe we're talking a different story here. But Calvin, get us out of here.
Yeah, I'll just say pound for pound. The answer is definitely Steve Smith, but that's another topic for another day. We're in fact with that, we're done with football talk. That's all we are going to talk about with the football world. So now it's time for anybody who watches the show knows that now we transition and we get to know you a little bit, Tag. So we'll start with a question that we just start everybody off with, and it's fitting because we're going to ask you what your intro music would be. So if you were a closer in baseball or a wrestler or whatever, what intro music best introduces you to a crowd?
Well, it would 100% be Korn. I'm a huge Korn guy. I've been since I was like, I don't know, 13 years old. I've seen them live like over 30 times. So it would either be Blind, because obviously you have the track Are You Ready? The first words that ever came out of them as a band. And then there's It's On. So I'm gonna go with It's On because it's a song that's not very well known, but it's like one of my favorite Korn songs. So It's On, and it's kind of fitting. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Love that. We must be pretty close to the same age because that's about the time that I got into Korn too. So I'm with you there. I like that.
Awesome.
Nice. So moving on to you and football, or not football, actually sports in general. But tell us, what did you play growing up, and what were your favorite teams and favorite players?
I was a baseball player throughout my high school life too. I played that my entire life. So baseball was like my favorite sport when I was younger. Basketball was huge into because like I was raised in Chicago, and Michael Jordan. I've watched a lot of sports in my life, and there's only so many players that I could sit here and say, hey, I was legit fortunate in my life to watch this guy do what he does. And Michael Jordan was that guy. I don't know. I know it's nostalgia, and I know it's that because I was from Chicago, but if you didn't see it, you can't believe it. You can't understand it, the impact that he had on the game. So he was my favorite, but like off to the side, Alonzo Mourning was always a guy that I gravitated towards because I was always a guy that I didn't want the top tier guy. Obviously Jordan was that, but Shaq was like the guy, right? And I couldn't wait until Shaq and Alonzo got together because it was like a battle between two of the top centers in the league. And Alonzo just always seemed like a good dude. And I know he's doing good things in life now, off the court. So he was one of my favorites. But yeah, I've always been into sports. If I'm doing one thing, it's another. And I got into cars later in life, so even racing a little bit. So I'm really into everything. It's just once I started writing about football, everything else kind of faded into the background though, because you spend so much time doing that, right? Is that, if you want to be good at it and you want to perfect it and you want to give, in-depth analysis, you almost need to dedicate your life to it. And then when you're done with that, it's like, okay, do I spend time with the family and friends, or do I sit down and watch some more sports? And I chose to try and get some more family time. So unfortunately, those things have kind of went by the wayside, but I love football, and I found the job that I meant to do.
Yes.
That's fantastic. I know I was a big fan of Grandmama as well.
Oh yeah, Larry Johnson.
Any dude that's like 260 pounds, he's wearing like a moo out there and playing hoops, you automatically gravitate to. You mentioned the Bulls. You watched the Bulls kind of when you were younger. Maybe didn't quite pick up on everything that was going on. So when Michael Jordan, that series came out, Last Dance or whatever that was, did that really hit you in the feels? Did that kind of open your eyes a little bit more about that era?
I already knew the whole story. No, I kid you not. I will tell you guys a story. I wrote it in the primer. So in the primer, I write an intro every week to tell like a personal story that hopefully people can just relate to. The one story was about Jordan, that retirement. So I was watching, it was the White Sox, I believe it was a playoff game that I was watching with my dad. And before they went to commercial break, they said Michael Jordan was there and that there was rumors that he might retire. And I was like, you got to be kidding. Like I was the kid that had Jordan all over my walls. I had every color jersey he had. I had his Olympic jersey. I had everything. Like my name, Michael, obviously, I signed it like Michael Jordan. I practiced his signature. So, and all my teachers knew this at school. I went to school, and at this time, I think I was in like the 3rd or 4th grade. My teachers let me go into the teacher's lounge to watch his retirement speech because they knew how much it meant to me. Wow. It was like legit one of the worst days of my life. I remember watching it and thinking, you got to be kidding. And then going to watch him play baseball. I'm like, dude, come on. Like you're no. And then when he came back, it was obviously great. And then he retired again. But yeah. So I know that Michael Jordan, LeBron debate is there. But one, I don't think you can compare players from different eras. I think it's unfair to do. But again, if you didn't see Jordan play and if you weren't alive during that time, I think it's really difficult to say that anyone has the impact that he did on sports.
Speaking of potentially the worst days of your lives, if we got Mike Tagliere together with with Yates there, and we got Joe Pisapia together, and we got you guys in a bunch of little tight onesies and had you come down to Indianapolis to do like a 3-man combine, who's going to wow the scouts here? What kind of trash talk's going on there in that event?
Yates is going to win if I don't smack him. But I will smack Yates out of the competition. I'll just wave my hand and he kind of just goes away. Pisapia would just spend all the time talking, so he's definitely last. But yeah, I'm going to win that because I'm going to smack Yates and he's not going to be able to finish the combine. He's going to pull a John Ross and get knocked out. But if in reality, if we were doing it, Yates he's the best athlete. He's in the best shape of us for sure.
Yeah. A recent question that's been going around Twitter. Talk about a decision that changed the course of your life. You can't say marriage or like a birth of your child or something like that.
Yeah, this one was easy for me. It was the decision to go into football, and there were a variety of factors that led to me doing that. I was telling someone the other day, I had a cushy job. I had a great job. It was a career. I worked for Chase Private Client in finance, and PFF had offered me a contract that was basically in-season work. And the contract was up at the end of February. And it was like, hey, we want to offer you this job. It's full-time in season. Are you able to do this? It's a massive pay cut. I knew it and all that, like literally like a lot to the point where, I couldn't believe I got that offer because I had been writing. Not many people know it because I've been at Fantasy Pros so long. They just followed me when I got there. But I had my own website for 3.5 years that I ran, didn't make a dime, literally paid money to run the site. And then, I got part-time at PFF for 2 years, but then again, they offered me the full-time in season. It was like, that was my break to like a chance to do it. And my wife said, you're going to do it. And I'm like, so she like literally, it took a couple weeks to talk me into leaving my job to say, hey, because she was graduating nursing school at the time. And it was like, hey, I'm going to make some more money. We'll make it work. We sold our house. We had our dream house. We sold it in order to make it work, to downgrade our house. We moved obviously to be somewhere more affordable. And then legit, as this process is going on, as I'm about to like finish my career at Chase, my wife, we found out she's pregnant. And as someone that was supporting our family at the time, it was like, I can't do this. There's no way I could do this. And fortunately, my wife kept pushing me and she said, this is what you're meant to do. I know that. And yes, it sucks in the short term, but we're going to make it work. And it will pay off. And, it was getting to the point of the end. I grinded my butt off that year. So when someone puts that much faith into you and says, hey, I believe in you that way, it sounds corny and I don't really care, but failure it wasn't an option for me. Like I'm not losing at this game. Like right. I'm going to put everything I have into it. And fortunately, Fantasy Pros reached out to me with a month to go on my contract and said, hey, we're not poaching or anything. We just want to reach out and say, hey, we're starting a content team. We don't know your situation. Would you be interested in a full-time year-round role? And I said, well, funny you mention it. My contract is coming up. And so now I'm now entering my 5th year with Fantasy Pros full-time. And it's everything, my life changed so much because of that decision. And I love my job. I do. It's just like, it's one of those things where your kids are able to see it, because I have a daughter that's older and I have a son who's now 4. And it's like, they're able to see you put your mind to something, like you have no idea how powerful that can be. It does take a lot of work and it takes a lot of sacrifice, which we did, time with friends, time with family, selling houses. But to work back and get it, it makes it all worth it.
Shout out to your wife, man. That's big.
Love her.
Seriously.
Yeah. She's the MVP of this household. She's the only reason I'm doing this. Like, I'll never downplay that.
Wow. Really beautiful story.
Yeah.
So kind of diving into fantasy more, let's talk about specific leagues that you're in. Maybe talk about, tell us about the first fantasy football league you were in.
This is a funny story. So as I mentioned, I played sports my whole life, and a lot of my friends played sports. We knew each other through sports, whatever. And I heard about fantasy football, and I'm not even kidding at all. I thought fantasy football was made up football characters. So when I heard people saying, "Oh, I play fantasy football," I'm like, "You nerd." So one day I was in the truck, and on 670 Sports Talk Radio in Chicago, the Score, they had Paul Charchian on, and he started talking about fantasy football, and I'm like, oh, they're talking about real players. Like, this is a real thing. And I was like, this is something I'd be really into, because I'm a big numbers guy, big into stats. And so I was like, all right, here's what I'm gonna do. So I actually went to Yahoo and the public forums, and I joined a league. This was in, I think, 2008. I joined a league. So I was late to the party. I joined a league, and I didn't tell my friends about it because I wanted to see what was happening. I joined that. I won it. But during the whole process, I was like, this is the best. This is the greatest. So I had to convince all my friends that fantasy football wasn't for nerds and play with me. So we started our home league in 2009. And that's when kind of everybody started to catch on, in my circle anyway, what fantasy football was, and that was the first league I played in that I was embarrassed to tell my friends about.
So you obviously loved it. You thought it was great. And then at some point you made the decision that you were going to start your own website. Obviously you wanted to be not just a consumer of fantasy football, but a contributor to the space. Like, what was that transition like for you?
Well, that's another funny part, and it goes back to the wife. So right out of high school, I went to build and deliver office furniture for my dad's company. I wanted to make money. I got out of high school and I was like, let's make money. Like they were like, we'll pay for you to go to college, or you could join the company. I was like, I want to run the company. So I went and did that, and I ended up breaking my back, like legit multiple fractures, blew out a few discs. I had to have a fusion back at, I think I was 28 at the time. So 28 years old, major back surgery. They said, hey, you're not going to be able to go back to this line of work anymore. But it's going to be a year recovery from the surgery, because they took part of my hip to fuse my back together. It was bad, but it was a year recovery. So during that recovery, a lot of sitting around, going to therapy. But I started writing on my laptop. We were getting ready for the fantasy season, and I'm writing on my laptop like a paragraph on every player, just basically talking myself through why I did not want to draft each player. And my wife looked over at me and she goes, what are you doing with the stuff that you're like? Are you wasting your time? Like, what are you writing? And I was like, I'm just writing about football. Like, she's like, well, why don't you do anything with it? And I was like, what the hell am I going to do with it? This is literally my notes. It's like something I would do when I was a kid, And she's like, well, okay, if you had a website, what would you call it? And I was like, I don't know, tagsfantasyfootball.com, because my nickname was Tags growing up. And literally 10 minutes later, she handed me her laptop, said, I bought the domain, now create your damn website. And
she's dope, man.
Wow.
She's the MVP of the household.
We need to interview her.
I was gonna say, we might be talking the wrong eggs here right now.
No, it was so she did that, and then all of a sudden I start getting into it, because like I'm the type where it's like I don't ever put like one foot in, and it's like, let's see how this feels, like where it's like, let's go all in, let's right. And I remember the first emails I got. There was one guy titled The Beer Inspector was his email. He emailed me every single roster in his league and said, what can I do about a trade? I took the time. I went through the entire league. I was like, this is how you manipulate this. And I started getting more emails, and I was like, all right, this is cool. And I started a Twitter account, and it was like, I start getting in touch with people. And it's like, the crazy part about all of this is that once I started getting in tune with the fantasy football community with Twitter, I found out about Fantasy Pros, and I think it was like 2 years later, where I was like, hey, I emailed the then own. I didn't even know he was the owner, but I was emailing their support team. I said, hey, I saw you guys have a accuracy competition. Can I become a part of that? And I get an email back from Dave, and he says, hey, we're looking for guys that are basically established. They have websites up, for a while. So maybe apply, next year or something like that. And I was like, okay, I appreciate it. If you ever need anybody, let me know. He emailed me back like a week later and said, hey, I went to your website and it's really in depth. Like, you write a lot. And so would you like to join the competition? You can't be part of the yearly competition, but I can get you in ranking with the experts to see how you're doing. And so they did. And oddly enough, I ended up getting hired by Fantasy Pros after that. But that's the reason I got the job with PFF, is because I had finished top 6 in the accuracy competition in multiple seasons. So they were like, we're just looking for the most. They didn't hire me because I was a good writer. They hired me because I had done well in that accuracy competition, and I started to build a name for myself. And then from there, I started to become a better writer and writing more and more. So it was a long time. I wrote a long time for either no money or almost none. But in the end, again, that's sacrifice. Like I tell people now, like 'cause a lot of people ask me, how do I get started? And I do this. I'm like, write every day. And they're like, well, I don't like writing. I'm like, well, get really good in media, whether it be on YouTube, Twitch, whatever, to go through it. But understand, like, don't go into the mindset and say, if I don't make it in 2 years, I'm going to walk away. It doesn't happen like that. Some people it does. Some people, they grab right away. They get a hold of the right people. They land in the right spot, whatever. Awesome. Kudos to them. Take advantage of it. But I can tell you that my grind along the way, it made me appreciate and understand exactly what I have. And that's the reason I still do what I do today. Even though I have a great job and people tell me I don't have to worry and I could take some more time off. It's just not who I am. And I know there's a lot of people out there that want that. They want my job. And I'm going to do my best to make sure they don't get it.
So continuing along this journey, tell us some of the changes that you've seen in yourself from when you started versus where you are now.
My advice to people, don't go back and listen to yourself on podcasts. You really do in the beginning. You need to listen to yourself because you'll give yourself honest critique. But going back and like hearing some of the analysis I gave or reading some of the articles I wrote, I'm like, one, you were a terrible writer. For as much as you think you were good, you were terrible. Like I knew how to get a point across, but when it came to grammar and using of things, like I was terrible. Some would say that I'm still not great, but I'm getting better. But it's the constant need to find more, like challenge myself, because I know some people I could write some things down that would make people be like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, but to me, it seems like common knowledge. It's separating that, because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that people in the industry have, is because they assume everyone is on their level. When in reality, some people say, well, fantasy pros is general. It's for the intermediate fantasy player. Like, we're looking for hardcore, we want to know breakout age. We want to know this. We want to know. 90% of the people playing fantasy football don't give a damn about breakout age or understand what it even means. So it's like, to me, it's being able to relate to people and being able to say, I remember what it was like to start playing fantasy. I remember the stats that I gravitated towards. I need to challenge myself because it's what keeps me interested. I need to dig deep to find a stat that no one knows. But at the same time, don't forget about the people that were you. I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I love Fantasy Pro, so I guess I'm a
no. There's different levels because they have beginner stuff on there to relate to the casual fan, but then there's not everybody's going to read the primer. It's 35,000 words. I don't expect them to, but that's basically what I guess I was brought on for, to have that deeper analysis.
Yeah. Can you tell us a story about one of your favorite podcasts or interviews that you've done?
So, I've done, there's been a lot.
Like the one that pops out, the first one that comes to mind.
Well, I'll say this then. I will say that Liz Loza, shout out to Liz. She's awesome. So I went to an FSTA when I worked for PFF part-time. And basically, I just wanted to go to interact with people, to say, hey, if I'm ever going to make it anywhere in this industry, I want to shake hands. I want to do this. So I went around and introduced myself to different people of different companies. And I saw Liz and I was like, Liz, I'm a big fan. Like, seriously, give me a hug. So we hung out, like me, her, and my wife, and like for a little while. And she's like, hey, I didn't know of you. I'm sorry. And I was like, don't worry about it. Like, it's not your job to know who I am. But she told me, she's like, can I get you on the podcast? And she had a podcast with John Evans that they did. And so I think this is right before she got hired with Yahoo, I think. But basically we just talked, chatted, and then she invited me onto that podcast. And I said, you know what? I'm catching a flight home. I was like, I should be home. I was like, if you could, like, maybe 30 minutes later than you wanted to, like, I promise you, I'll get right to my computer and we'll record. So she's like, we'll make it happen. So the entire flight home, I basically was getting my notes together, making sure that I was prepared for everything. And that was a podcast that it was like the first time I had a big name in the industry, just like kind of say, I'm going to give you a shot on a podcast. That's the one that jumps out to me.
Nice.
We love Liz over here. So this actually part of this whole Viper Pit behind the grind kind of, she was instrumental in this kind of getting launched. I think I threw out there on the Twitter, two of my favorites out there are Liz and Adam Rank, just the personality and stuff like that.
The best.
So I'm like, hey, any chance, I would love to get Liz Loza and Adam Rank on the show. That'd be fantastic. Well, all of a sudden, Liz Loza pops in, I'm in. And Adam Rank goes, I'm in. And the next thing you know, I get a DM from Adam going, hi, I'm Adam. Just kind of slides in there. I'm like, okay, crap. I guess this is happening. We're going to start doing this behind the grind. And then one thing led to another. And you talk about this a little bit, but getting that first one is kind of that confidence booster for, okay, Liz came on. She didn't leave halfway through the show. Okay, we got something going here. Okay, you know what? Adam actually looked like he enjoyed himself on here. So that's kind of how this behind the grind kind of started, from not having any guests to someone such as Liz going, hey, I'll do your show with you. And then it just kind of took off from there. So, yeah, we're big fans of Liz over here for sure.
That is so cool. You said that moment, you're like, oh, like, hi, I'm Adam. That moment for me was with Evan Silva. So I remember I was watching like a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, and all of a sudden I get a DM from Silva. I followed him, but he hadn't followed me until then. And he's like, hey, what's up, man? This is Evan. He gives me his phone number. He's like, call me sometime. I'm like, am I supposed to call right now? Like, I don't know. I don't know how this works. I don't want to seem like the guy that gets asked on a date or asked a girl on a date, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, I'm available. But of course I'm going to do that. So I called him. We literally talked on the phone for like half hour to an hour, and that was the phone call that was kind of like, holy crap. We met for a couple beers a couple weeks later, and he tweeted me out. It was cool. Yeah, there's moments for sure that in this industry that I don't think sometimes people realize just the impact they can have if they spend that time.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It's like, yeah, no, I definitely appreciate those two doing that. And a shout out, because Jake's ego will take a big hit if I don't mention him. Jake, but in reality, Jake Seeley invited to my first industry draft in person. So I went out there, and that's where I was able to meet some people. And I'll never forget, Jake did that for me. At SiriusXM. I remember I was like a tourist. I'm walking through the place at SiriusXM, like snapping all these pictures. I'm like, that's so cool. So I know he's mad at me now because I haven't been to a flex draft in a little while, but I appreciate Jake too.
Well, if the borders open up and I make it down to Canton for the Kings Classic, I will be you. I will be that tourist down there, because I'm down in that Dawson division right now. And, you got that's basically a big time experts league. It's the who's who, all these experts are all in one place. And yeah, I'll be like taking pictures. Like you said, this is my XM radio station. I'll be taking pictures left, right, and center. So
that's awesome. No, enjoy it, man. I've been there the last couple of years. I'm trying to get down there, because like with the move that we had, there's like so many expenses that are coming up that we're trying to work through and stuff like that. I do want to make it out there. I think my favorite part isn't the draft. I think it's just hanging out with everybody out there, because there's so many good people in this industry.
True.
Absolutely.
So let's just say you didn't happen to tune in and listen to Paul Charchin on the radio. You didn't find out what fantasy football was. You didn't, like, your life turns a little bit of a different way, and obviously it worked out the right way. But if it didn't, what do you think you would be doing right now?
I'd still be working for Chase Private Client. I mean, because I had hurt my back, and that's why I got the job to begin with them. My brother was a branch manager at the time. Now he's a financial advisor, where honestly, it was a good career. It really was. Banks are taking a weird direction right now because of all the online stuff, and like, are they going to have brick and mortar branches and stuff like that? But I probably would have been a financial advisor. Would I have loved my life? No. I don't like selling every day. The idea becomes that you sell the person you are. And I believe in that to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's like some days you just get there and you're just like, I just don't have it today. And you don't want your paycheck to depend on that. So it's really difficult in sales. And I give people props that do that every single day, because there's some that are better than others. But even yeah, I'm definitely where I'm meant to be. And hopefully fate would have twisted it somewhere to say, hey, do something that makes you happy,
Terry, you're up.
All right. So kind of going back to fantasy sports, tell us maybe one thing that the industry as a whole has taught you about yourself.
Ooh. What has the industry taught me? I think that I'm good at understanding. They've taught me that I'm good at understanding what people want to read. And I say that because I tried pitching PFF. They don't. I mean, I know that Jeff Ratcliffe knows it because he was there, but I don't know if they know it or realized the potential with that article. Because I pitched it and I said I wanted to do it, and they said it was going to take way too much of my time, and it does. It takes absolutely way too much of my time. But I got to Fantasy Pros and I said I want to do it, and they said, all right, well, we'll try it out for a year. Let's see what happens. And that thing has grown to a point where, like, literally, my mom meets people at church. That they tell her, they're like, your son's Mike. I read his article every week, and she's like, what article are they talking about? So now she makes me send her the article every single week. And she reads the intro. She's like, I don't care about the football. She's like, I think it's cool that you're doing the intro stuff. She's like, because I think it helps people to get people to know you. But it's one of those things where I think everybody wants to have an opinion, and they should. But as to what works and what the masses want, I feel like with the response that's come from that, it's that I understand what it's like to be a fantasy player and not have things available. And it's like, I want to deliver those things. I want to say, even if it takes 70 hours a week, even if it takes me sitting at the computer at 4 a.m. to 10 a.m., whatever, like, I know what people want, and it's like, take the time to give it to them, and they appreciate it. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I wish I had more time to think about it. That's a good question. That's a really good one. What has Twitter taught me about myself? That I'm nicer than I thought, because I swear sometimes I want to just I've gotten better. Just like I've learned that the mute button is my friend, and just
Good restraint. Yeah.
move on. Yeah.
Twitter's an interesting place. Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here. Twitter's an interesting place because a lot of people find it can be toxic at times. Some people find, the community as a whole is great. I may be naive or not very intelligent, one of the two, probably both, actually, to be honest with you, if we're talking about me. But I can go into Twitter and I don't see any of this negativity or this and that. It doesn't really faze me because it's kind of like my release from real life. It's like a weird fictional, hey, buddy. It's kind of like a fictional place, Twitter, like Neverland or something, because I don't know if you could hear, but there's like footsteps above me. There's like 12 kids running around, and it's crazy here. Like, we had Shregs on. He basically referred to Philip Rivers as the American Matt Donnelly because we both have multiple children. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, for me, that's kind of an interesting area for me because Twitter, it's my quiet place. Like, I don't know how I can answer that question either. What has Twitter taught me? I'm almost kind of like you said, nicer on Twitter than I am on my everyday.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. I mean, Twitter, I don't know. Some people say it's gotten more toxic, and I'm like, I think it's always been there. It's just, do you attract it? And I always tried not to attract it, but at some point you like the following that as you get more following, it's the more of that you get. But at the same time, I try not to attract that. Like, I'm not the guy that's like a hot take guy. When you tweet out stuff like that, you're asking for those people to come after you. And I like to think that I'm logical. Most of my followers are. There's a few bad apples. It's like anything in life. It's just going to happen, and you have to figure out the best way to move on and not let it affect your day, because that's the worst.
So I love this, this whole family around and work from home. So I'm just going to.
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I love this.
Oh.
This is great. I think we all love it. But yeah, how's the working from home been going for you?
Good. Obviously, you saw my little one. He typically goes to sitter. The sitter was sick today, so he was home. Typically, he's pretty good about leaving me up here, though. But it's weird because in the beginning, I was home by myself, and no one else was here. Like, so Jonathan was So when I first started doing full time, he wasn't even born yet. And then my wife, she was a nurse. She was a bedside nurse in labor and delivery. And now she works from home as well. So she's still a nurse, but she's doing casework for insurance company. And so she's from home, and that became even more difficult because she just like walk downstairs, like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you think I'm doing? And it was just like, I thought I'd say hi. And then she'd come down and be like, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Is there anything you need? And it's like all those little things where you're like, if I go upstairs to grab something to drink, I'm not trying to get caught up in like a 20-minute conversation. And it's not trying to be mean, but it's almost like I told her, I'm like, I'm at work. And now it's to the point where I bother her more than she bothers me. So I walk down, I'm on my podcast. She's like, okay. And so it's one of those things, but working at home, you have to be self-motivated. And I've learned that my daughter is not one of those people because when school had to be done at home, it was like, all right, well, I can't wait to do school at home. And she couldn't wait. And then all of a sudden it was like, I'm better in person. I'm like, yes, you are. You have to know the person you are and what you're able, but like football stuff, so self-motivated where it's like, even if I'm off work, I'm probably going to sit down and do something with it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've kind of touched base. You talked about your wife being huge in your career and then how that worked. You talked about Jake Seeley kind of and Evan Silva extending that branch. We have a listener question that just kind of came in here. We'll call this person Mo Misamiya, just kind of so we don't want to use people's real names. No. And they're asking,
screw that guy.
They want to know what is the status under that ball cap.
It's a ball cap. It's there's some hair under there. There's not a whole lot. The children have taken care of that. I don't even take it off anymore. Seriously, it's just I'm to the point. So Matt, you shave your head. Joe,
yep.
I'm sorry, Schmo, is that what the name was? He shaves his head, and I know that. I don't know. Did you shave first off? Did you shave because you had a receding hairline, or was it just because I want to be bald?
No, it was kind of, if I went outside and the wind just blew at the right amount, it'd be like a dandelion. There'd be hair going missing. It was that thin. It was ready to go. Okay. I don't know if you can tell this, like obviously with the 12 kids here, I'm not even 40 years old. And this is what the result is here, right? We're not even 40. Calvin's over 40 and look at him. He looks like he's like 22.
Handsome. I mean, all of his hair, no gray.
Yeah, I know.
mean, come on, Calvin.
You want to piss a guy off, have all your hair and no gray hair on top of it. That's how you get there. But yeah, no, my hair was thin and it was like, you know what? I'm comfortable with it. I'm good. I know where it is. It's not going to come. Like even if I tip it here, I can get a little bit,
yeah.
But then it's like a clear runway right down the middle. I go with the Friar Tuck look, and well, that doesn't quite suit me.
That's funny. The reason one, it's like wrapping your mind around having hair your entire life, and then all of a sudden it starts fading away. And then to say like, all right, I think I've gotten there. And then your wife says, don't shave it. And you're like,
yeah,
what the hell am I supposed to do now? Because I'm like, I see pictures and I'm like, yo, that's got to go. Like, it's terrible. Like she'll take a video of me and Jonathan, the little dude, like in the yard or something. I'm like, huh? Like, I don't see that angle. No one sees that angle because I'm 6'2". So like some pictures don't show it, but like if I'm bent over to help him, I'm like, why have I not shaven my head? And it's just like wrapping my mind around that. But seeing you, Adam and his beautiful bald head, Pisapia, like you guys have nice heads. I mean, and I do have a round head, but I just can't wrap my mind around it. So I'm just going to keep wearing a hat.
I could totally relate to that because my wife was like anti-shaving my head. Like she was totally against it. She still doesn't like it shaved completely. But I remember that moment for me is I used to drive a Zamboni before I got moved into the office. So I'd be driving the Zamboni. I'd have buddies and my dad's buddies would get a hold of my cell phone while I'm driving and they would make fun of me. He's like, dude, put a hat on. And they'd be like sending text messages while I'm driving. Because of course I'm 6'1" like you. And not many people see the top of my head, but when you're driving the Zamboni and the stands kind of come above and everyone sees it, there's text messages going. So I was like, you know what? That's it. It's gone. Here we go. I was comfortable with it. I was ready for it, but the wife was not. And now here it is.
Yeah, I'm just going to wear a hat. Even if I do shave it, and I'm going to shave it soon. I'm not going to bick it though. I'm going to do like a 1 or a 2, like a buzz cut. I'm still going to wear a hat and I don't think anybody's even going to notice.
There you go.
That's a good way to slide it in there is to go with the 1, start with the 2, slide down to the 1, eventually take the guard off. Not quite a bick yet. There's a little bit of stubble there. And then eventually maybe the wife kind of becomes climatized to the bald head and she wouldn't even notice the bicking.
That's funny. That's funny.
Last question here. What do you have in store for the rest of the off season?
What don't I? Basically I have my list of articles that I do every off season to go through and try and, again, put yourself in a position of a fantasy player and say, what would I want to read about? And it's all those things. I've done articles on what coaching changes mean. When a player switches teams, I do articles on what age do players fall off, because there's a conception out there that wide receivers start to suck after they turn 29 or 30 years old, which is absolutely not true. So I do articles to try and show people why that is or is not the case, and just basically just try and write articles that people want to read. So that try and play a round of golf. I don't. I want to, but I haven't played now since I think August of 2019, and that's because obviously the football season started right after that, and then the pandemic started, and it's like now we moved, and it's like I miss hitting that stupid little white ball in that stupid little white cup because it takes my mind away from everything. Like it's the one time that I think it's the one thing I found that I could do that I just stopped thinking because my brain is always going. But golf makes it shut off for whatever reason, and I miss it.
Well, Tags, we so appreciate you coming on and taking your time, and for your son, I think Jonathan, you said was his name. Appreciate him making an appearance too, and just to close us out here, just anybody watching this, first of all, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Just look down there and make sure that you are subscribed to this channel because there has been so many great guests, just like Tags, where we got into some really good conversation and learned a little bit about them and their history. Some of them we even got into the history of fantasy football itself, like with Bob Harris and Paul Charchian, who you mentioned, which is just fantastic. You can go back and listen to the ones from a couple of months ago. You don't have like this one. We talk a little bit about football and then a lot about the person. So there's no timestamp to it. You can go listen to it whenever. For anybody who's on Clubhouse, make sure you're following Major and Tara because they're doing a fantastic job there. And I have noticed that both of their Twitter follower accounts have been going up, which it needs to. Still very underfollowed, though. They need to be followed more. And so with that, Matt, great job today. Send it over to you for the last word.
The last word. Just remember this here. Bald is beautiful. And when you look across the industry right now, you've got Adam Rank, the Bob Harrises, the Pisapias. You've got some other great, beautifully bald men. And maybe coming soon, we got Major as well. I don't want to forget about Major. Derek Brown. We got Derek Brown too. We got Derek Brown. So there's a lot of bald, beautiful men. And coming soon, potentially, Tags will be joining that exclusive club of beautifully bald men in the fantasy industry.
But you won't know it because I will still wear a Nike hat. I think that people actually tie it to me now. Like if I put on Twitter today and I said, when you think of me, what do you think of? 100%. Like I've had people literally, like we went to Disney World, people like on vacation, and people come up like Tags, and they're like, I saw the Nike hat, and I had to see if it was you. And it was like they kind of tie me to it now, so I guess it's a thing.
It's amazing.
Sounds like you go like take off that cap, you got to go incognito then, right?
I kind of would, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still at the stage where it's kind of cool when people come up and they know me. I'm kind of like, hey, like it's nice to meet you too. I want to meet you guys too.
So
I know that feeling. Whenever I hear someone yell.
And you,
Whenever I hear the word dad get mentioned in a crowd, I automatically respond. It's a natural thing for me right now. So
that's awesome.
So with that being said, for Tags, for Calvin, for Major, for Tara, this is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. See you Monday when we have Mike Clay joining the show. Good night. I gotta find that end button quicker.
I don't know if